Hello all, thank you for joining our session. Is it possible to use the digital landscape to plan for projects that will be implemented outdoors? This session outlines how HPV engaged with community leaders and members around pedestrian safety and walkability. 2, assess needs in the community around pedestrian safety and walkability, engage the community on what they think some of the concerns are, set priorities, and create a walkability and pedestrian safety action plan, and then ultimately set plans to begin implementation. Hope you're able to join. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us, our session as part of Neighbor Power Indy 2022. My name is Logan Lane, and I work for Health by Design as a walk and bike program coordinator, and I'm hanging out with Adrienne Opp, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Adrienne Opp, and I live in the Hawthorne neighborhood of the Near West community.
We are here today to discuss if it's possible to use the digital landscape to plan for built environment changes around pedestrian safety and walkability. And we'll walk you through answering that question in this session. Just to give you a lay of the land and what we'll be covering today, I'll give you an overview of who Health by Design is. I'll also give you an overview of our walkability and pedestrian safety program, our Walk Champion program, which is a better term for it. We'll give you a little information about the Walkability Hub and Walk Champion program, and then Adrienne's going to talk about how they're implementing it in their community. Just a little bit about Health by Design. Health by Design is a public health organization that works at the intersection of the built environment and public health, collaborating across sectors and disciplines to ensure Indiana communities have neighborhoods, public spaces, transportation infrastructure that promote active living for all. We like to say we work in 4 buckets: walking, biking, transit, and land use. And accessibility kind of fits into that walking bucket. So just so you know, we like to say we look to achieve these following goals: advocating for policy change, building community capacity, convening diverse partners, educating on best practices, facilitating dialogue, promoting smart design, and providing technical assistance. Studies have found that your zip code often affects you more than your DNA. So we know that individuals are affected by the relationships that they have, their friends, their family, the institutions that they are a part of, and the community that they live within, and then ultimately the public policies that are enacted within those communities. So when it comes to pedestrian safety and walkability, we must look at those upstream items, those policies that are enacted, the institutions that are in each community, and work with those folks to ultimately change the built environment that makes communities safer for walking, biking, and transit use in Indianapolis. Just to give you a little overview of Health by Design's history of looking at pedestrian crashes and pedestrian safety overall. Over the last 10 years, Health by Design has had a partnership with the Marion County Public Health Department and the city of Indianapolis. We have worked to analyze pedestrian crashes with cars, map them, and then figure out what are the best actions to take to countermeasure crashes happening in Indianapolis. We have found that there are 16 high crash zones. Keep in mind that Marion County is 403 square miles. 45% of all pedestrian crashes happen in 7% of the area that is Marion County, and that is the 16 high crash zones in Indianapolis. We choose several crash zones to work in every year to focus targeted engagement with community members, and then work to countermeasure those things through priorities that the community set to make sure that their neighborhoods are safer in the long run. And just to give you an overview, we worked on the Near West Side, which is where Adrienne is from, the Midtown area, so about 16th Street to Meridian, all the way up to Broad Ripple, the northeast side of Indianapolis, the far west side as well. Now I'm going to go in a little bit and talk about the ways in which we engaged with the community members that we targeted in 2020 and 2021. We engaged them in a three-phase process: assessment and information gathering, community outreach and engagement, and intervention and implementation. First, we gathered leaders we called walk champions. These walk champions were highly engaged individuals. They were really interested in their neighborhoods and what was going on, and they were really interested in pedestrian safety and walkability in their neighborhood. Then we looked to find community organizations that would support them in their efforts. These are your libraries, your community centers, your schools, and those are called community hubs. We worked with the walk champions once they were selected to go through 8 cohort meetings. This is where we were able to build capacity around how to find out what was going on in their neighborhood, how to collect information, how to engage with folks. In the first phase, we focused solely on who are the movers and shakers in your community and what are the issues. Collect those, figure out what those are, and even if some of the ideas are really out there, collect your neighborhood's ideas about what needs to be done when it comes to walkability and pedestrian safety. That was phase 1. Here you can see a map. This is from our Midtown area. This is a map of all the daily destinations and all of the movers and shakers in the area. You can see that some of these places have sole locations, and some of them might just be people that the community champions were able to connect with, all of which are important in creating something, an action plan to move forward with making their neighborhoods a better place to walk. Next, we took that list of people, those folks that were engaged with by the walk champions, and worked through with the champions on how to engage with them. Now, there's a caveat. We all went through a pandemic in 2020, and so some of that engagement processes were really difficult. We had to figure out ways to be creative. We had to also compromise. Sometimes those meetings were meeting on Zoom, like all of us were doing in 2020. And maybe it means if I can just get a meeting with the principal, or if I can just get a meeting with the library who is already busy. And our champions, very proud of those folks, and they were able to engage with members of the community and stakeholders in a digital way during this time. Also during phase 2, we did what was called a walk audit. In years past, Health by Design has conducted walk audits throughout the Indianapolis community, essentially looking at intersections and corridors and marking troubled areas that might have pedestrian safety issues. This is something we've been able to do with the community in the past, but due to COVID, we did this with Health by Design staff and close partners. This was a big loss for us. We weren't able to work with walk champions and really get, we call it boots on the ground and learning by doing. And so that was something that we were really disappointed about, but we were able to carry that out as a staff. This is an example of phase 2, and if you don't mind, I'll go back here. As part of phase 2, towards the end, we conducted a workshop. In this phase, there were 2 workshops. One that was a general workshop. This conducted just general information about walkability and pedestrian safety, learning about community organizations in the area that focus on community development, things that about like who is your city councilors, who do I call if there's a broken sidewalk, how do I use Request Indy, things like that. And then the second workshop was geared towards each individual area that we worked in to create an action plan that had 5 priorities in it. This culminates all of the things that the champions were gathering, from the list of contacts to the issues that they collected about how to make walking better, how to make it safer, all into one action plan. And Adrian will talk about that here in a bit. And as you can see here, in the middle, there are ways that people engage with residents over time. Over here on the right, you can see we used a Google Jamboard, which is essentially a digital post-it exercise where our walk champions were able to guide people through concerns and then think about solutions with their community in workshop 2, and then even think about, okay, we've got these solution ideas. What does that mean to move forward? Who needs to be involved? And that that material was kind of the very beginnings of the action plan that would be created. Just to note, the action plans focused around the 6 E's. Many organizations do this, but the Safe Routes Partnership is kind of their framework to use the 6 E's. They are engineering, education, equity, encouragement, engagement, and evaluation. So the priorities that the community set out for themselves in their action plan all dealt with how do we think about engineering when it comes to the walkability and pedestrian safety needs? What needs to be done education-wise to make sure that our streets are safe? What are the equity issues that our neighborhoods have that make walkability not possible for some? How do I encourage my neighbors to advocate for walking and biking in my neighborhood? How do I engage with community members in my neighborhood? And then lastly, how do I evaluate? How do I know if my goals have been reached? I do want to note a Safe Routes Partnership took out enforcement due to different things around the country happening in 2020 with the death of George Floyd, and the enforcement and the history of pedestrians being targeted by police officers. So that was in change to engage. Lastly, I want phase 3. This is the fun part. This is taking that action plan that was put together by the community and figuring out how do we get it done. I love this part. Health by Design is the sort of behind the scenes resource organization at this time. I will note that Adrian Opp and the Near West Livability Task Force are not the creators of their area's plan. We worked with Impact Fairfax Christian Church. They felt that it was best that the Near West Livability Task Force take over for them, as they were very connected with the community. And so Adrian here is representing sort of the housing organization of the plan, and she'll go over a little bit about how she thinks each of their priorities are going to interact with the community plans that they already have. Lastly, these are just the kind of different plans that were made during phase 2. You can see here in these examples, I think this is a Midtown example, they kind of mapped out different areas that were everyday destinations. And so you can see an example of a cover of the action plan and then some of the things that might be inside. Adrian?
All right, thank you so much, Logan. So as I already mentioned, I live in the Hawthorne neighborhood, and like Logan was mentioning, I am representing the Livability Task Force. Hawthorne, Hawville, Stringtown, and We Care are the 4 neighborhoods that reside in the Near West, and the Livability Task Force is one of the task forces for the Near West. And Livability is a project focused task force that focuses on 10 key areas. public safety, health, civic participation, art and culture, public spaces, walkability and transit, local food access, youth and older adult populations, as well as our legacy. And so as you can see, the Walkability Action Plan really fits right into our niche of the Livability Task Force. Not only does it fit in, there are a lot of things going on and being worked on already that the plan helps to bring some focus to. And I'm going to go through some of that here in just a moment. There are currently 5 priorities that we have in our action plan, but I'm just going to touch on probably 3 or 4 of those. So if we move on to that, the next slide, I'll talk about this priority. And so just to orient you a bit to these action plans, you can see the priority at the top in bold, and it's important that we connect all of the work that we have going on in the West so you can see how this is related to the goals in our quality of life plan. As you already heard Logan describe, each of the priorities are using the 6 C's framework, and each priority is broken down in the center of that slide into action items with correlating timelines there on the right. Then at the bottom are examples of several of our key supporting partners that we think are important for the priorities. I'm not going to go into these details, the specifics on each of the priorities, but did just want to provide you with a brief overview to help orient you to what you're seeing on the slides. Now, focusing on the priority on this slide, improving upon the walkability and bikeability in our major corridors, it's a major goal for the Near West. There are several infrastructure plans for our main corridors, Michigan Street, Washington Street, 10th and 16th. As you are probably aware, the blue line that is anticipated or coming along Washington Street will bring some major renovations to the area. It's important for us and to all of us that we consider that those infrastructure changes that are made are considerate to the many who walk to and from our schools, to those who currently who are or will be catching a bus for work, or any of those who may be able to in the future have a designated bike lane for safe bikeability to and from work or school as well. The Michigan Street corridor is also planned for some major reconstruction as well. We have several local businesses and organizations along Michigan Street, and so it's important to consider the current and future sidewalk and bike lane use for any of those who work in those areas, as well as our residents who are going to those businesses. And then, as you also likely already know, the traffic on 10th and 16th Streets, like our others, is very busy, and we have a lot of homes kind of interspersed in and among those streets. So those are 10th and 16th also are main thoroughfares going from downtown Indianapolis to just west of downtown for folks that are traveling home from work or just going through. So there's a lot of activity in all of our main corridors that intersect with the Near West, and all of them have a lot of businesses, a lot of traffic amidst a lot of neighborhoods and a lot of residents who live between them. And so having improved sidewalks, designated bike lanes, and accessible bus transit is very important to us. I can move on and talk about the next priority that we have here on the next slide. And this priority is improving the safety of pedestrians going to school through safe routes to school. It's so very important to us, safe routes to school. We are really hoping to see a lot of perhaps the background done through that other priority I was just discussing. So I mentioned a lot of the things that are important to us in those main thoroughfares through those main corridors. But we also have this as a priority because it focuses more on education. And it's focused more specifically on our kids walking to school, And so we would like to connect with our schools and our parents to discuss any opportunities to improve our kids' safety walking to and from school. Partnering with their schools and parents will help us to hear what concerns parents may currently have, what they maybe already have done that they think is working very well, perhaps something that we just aren't knowledgeable of, and understand what schools and administrators may be working on, and enable us to connect what priorities they believe should happen for their kids, for the kids in our neighborhoods, and connect those priorities and those concerns to city departments that can help us to really do something about this. I'll move on to our next priority that we are also very passionate about: trees and landscapes along our main corridors. As you know, and just discussed, Washington, Michigan, 1016 Tibbs, and I would add White River here as well. While adding trees and landscaping is often attributed to the beautification, which is also very important, it's certainly true that it really improves the overall livability of a community as well. And so when you have nice trees and clean streets, it just generally makes you feel better about the place that you live. It's clean, it's nice, there's beautiful trees. But in addition to that, what trees and landscaping really help to improve are the air and water quality, as well as general temperatures that really are improved by those trees. And so improving upon the density of the trees that we have will not only make things look nicer, but are also key long-term sustainability improvements for us to have better air that we're breathing and safer water that we're using. And anytime there's something that is being built, like those main thoroughfares and corridors that we talked about, anything that's being developed in the community, it's really important, vitally important, that we consider the trees and the landscape around it. Another important point here to talk about with beautification, there are a number of cleanups that we are always doing throughout the year in all of our neighborhoods. We are often cleaning up along the internal streets, among and amidst all of our houses, and we don't often get to the main corridors that usually need some, sprucing up, cleaning up as well. So one thing we would love to see happen along our main corridors is perhaps a united business district cleanup. And using this action plan, again, with all of the action items and timelines, will help us to assist to identify our key resources and then connect and plan those next steps. And I'll just briefly touch on this last slide, this last priority that we have here, creating a community asset connectivity map. While I'm only going to briefly talk about it, and I've talked more about the other priorities, the community asset connectivity map will really give us a lot of information that we don't currently have. It would give us a high level view of those areas that we have done well, those that are in great shape, and those that we maybe can learn from. Again, we don't know that information today. We don't have that kind of all put together in a package for us to be able to see. And so something like this, a community asset connectivity map, will really help us to identify those areas we're doing things good. It's unfortunate, but it's all too often and very easy that we identify problems, kind of overlook the great that we do have. And so having an asset map for connectivity will help to highlight the good and allow us to really hone in on where we should.
Awesome. And as we wrap up, thank you all. And I think, the answer is yes, you can plan digitally to do these engagement processes, to collect information, to work with community organizations and community members. But there are a few things you have to keep in mind. One, flexibility. It takes time to build relationships. Community members are already doing things on their own. Adrian and team were already doing a lot of stuff. And it was up to us as Health by Design to connect with that and think through and ask questions and really not step over them. And so flexibility is one of those things. Two, the time. I mentioned that in the flexibility, but relationships take time. Trust building takes time. And then three, lastly, you can't always expect things to happen like that. And I think in our process throughout the 5 areas that we worked in, that was something we constantly worked with community members with. whether that be the community walk champions that we directly worked with as they engaged with the community and talked about priorities, or even community members that came to our workshops. There are so many things that have need right now, and thinking about, what does it mean to fix things now or to address things now as an advocate, as a community member, but then what does that look like long term? And so I think that those are the biggest things we've learned over a digital process. And arguably that's something that we have always should be learning as community advocates, is that these things take time. And as long as you have the relationships and the flexibility and the engagement processes to do those things with community members, not for them, you will have success over a period of time, and ultimately those relationships will be strengthened and more will get done according to organizational goals or community goals. Thank you for joining us, and thank you again, Adrian, for joining me, and have a great day.